Yes. What's up, people? I mean, it's been a while, guys. What have you guys been up to?
Learning how to talk to girls.
Talking to girls on social media or on some videos you're doing in your houses. Tuliambia we can't do videos as tech bloggers. But yes, guys, welcome back to yet another episode of 24-Bit. And I know it's been long since we last did our last episode, but let's first introduce ourselves. So I'm Nick Canali. I blog at techtrends.ke.co.ke.
Chenze Emmanuel, 100kenya.com.
I'm Dickson Otieno, techish.com.
Kaluka Wanjala, tekarena.co.ke.
Yes, thank you, guys. And yes, I know we can't run away from this conversation. It's been all over, and we've been dying to talk about this, right? How do you pronounce Huawei?
Huawei.
Wait,
Huawei.
not Huawei.
Huawei.
Okay, whatever it is, depending on your English teacher. But yes, let's talk about Huawei. I mean, they're not in a good position right now. Let's just admit that, right?
Yeah.
So why is the US after Huawei? What is happening in a nutshell, Dickson?
What's happening? The US banned Huawei from trading with American companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what's happening in a nutshell.
So the American companies that were already working with Huawei, they can't continue working with them because of the sanctions. And if you disobey the US sanctions, of course, that will be a problem for the American companies, and even not just American companies, some companies beyond. In Europe and I think in Japan, I saw some issues. Some companies said they are not going to work with Huawei going forward because of that. Yes.
Is it Chenze? Is it trade wars? Is it, I don't know.
Depends on who you ask and also someone's level of understanding. Because a lot of people are taking the whole matter at face value. The face value is Huawei is a security risk to America's national security infrastructure.
Well,
so as a result,
that's according to the US.
Yeah. So that's the face value, and that's what's being peddled out there. But Trump has come out to admit he's using the company to bargain with the Chinese government because they have this, China does a huge volume of trade with the US.
Yeah.
And as a result, there's need to be some housekeeping. And since Trump came to power and has this America First policy, he's been wanting to get the best deal terms for the US. So he's gone back to renegotiate all those things. And one, of course, China being one of their biggest trading partners, it means they needed to negotiate one of those. So they've been pushed back from Beijing and Washington and all those things. But if you can catch the attention of the Chinese, pulling one up on their biggest brand outside their country, which happens to be Huawei. So as far as Trump is concerned, and he's admitted this public, so anyone can look that up, he's using them as a bargaining chip to get the Chinese on the negotiating table and to get the kind of deals he wants. Because long before the Huawei ban, or Huawei was placed on that list by the Department of Commerce of the US, both China and the US had imposed tariffs of up to 25% on certain goods, which will have meant a lot of stuff being manufactured in China is levied at 25% tariff when entering the US, and the same thing for US goods going to China because China reciprocated. So that will have meant in effect a lot of the gadgets that Americans get to buy, iPads, iPhones, MacBooks, basically everything that comes out of China will have been a little bit costlier because those companies will pass on the cost to the consumer. So that's been it. So you can say a trade war, yes. Not many people will agree based on their level of understanding because the whole matter is barely technical. It's mostly political. Yeah. So it's mostly political. So when it comes to politics, there's a lot of variance, and things that are true today may not be true tomorrow because it's just neither here nor there. So there are so many there are so many moving parts in the whole discussion. So personally, I'd say it's part of a trade war. But the other bit is long before Trump became president, Huawei had also been accused by the Americans of issues to do with their security and everything. And that is informed by, there's also the threat posed by Huawei being now an emergent leader in technology, like the company is on the forefront when it comes to 5G, and that's a threat to America's dominance. There's also another political circus around there.
Yeah.
So you really can't, like, at least from my point of view, I really can't point one specific bit and say this is it. But there are so many factors, and you need to scratch beyond the surface to make a conclusion, or to at least get close to one. Yeah.
And the ban with Google, I think it was a real big blow for Huawei, right? And that means like services like YouTube, Gmail won't be accessible in future. They said they were talking about future Huawei devices, right? So the previous devices won't be affected by this ban.
When it was announced, it was like it will be immediate. When Google said they're pulling out Play services from Huawei devices, it was like it will be immediate. Then Android tweeted, the official Android account tweeted that the Play services will be available on all current, existing, and in stock Huawei phones. But then there's a reprieve for 90 days. So everything is kind of the way it used to be. So we're waiting for the 90 days. But we don't know about what happens after 90 days, what happens to the future of Huawei phones that run Android.
But what does this mean for Huawei as a company?
Actually, according to me, it means nothing. It just means we're going to have a situation where technology will be fronted from two sides. America will have their side of technology, China will have their side of technology. The rest of the world will choose where to fall. Yeah.
I was reading, I read your tweet actually in the article about what this ban actually means, Chenze. And you're talking about even the US. It's not really a big market for Huawei, baby.
It's never been. Actually, Huawei only as of March 2018, there are only over 300,000 devices, Huawei devices in the whole of North America. Not that's the US. The whole of North America, that includes Canada, that includes the US itself, includes parts of Mexico. So it's what's at play here, and this is the politics of it all, is the US has been a global superpower since the end of World War II, so it has all this muscle, and the way the world works is the global financial system, the global tech supply chain is anchored around the US. So they can use their muscle to keep everyone in line.
They basically want to control everything. They want to own it.
No, that's basically how they've always operated. They're a superpower after all. So as a result, they tend to have a lot of influence, more so in media. A lot of the media content that we consume is from American media houses. So we tend to get the Western point of view.
Yeah.
So as a result, that's why you see this ban reverberating across the world. But the impact on Huawei's volume of sales in the US is almost non-existent, because they were never there in the first place. When Huawei releases, at least in our small industry, when Huawei releases any new phone, the people who attend these media events are mostly American tech bloggers, YouTubers, the American press, and they're also very influential in the world. So they're the ones whose reviews of these Huawei devices we get to watch and everything. But that doesn't mean that same impact is translated to the consumers. In the US, in North America, there are not that many. So as a result, we tend to feel the media impact because of America's position on the table.
Yeah.
But Huawei is looking at its books. The impact will be because of US influence around the world.
Yeah.
It will affect them even in countries far away from the US. But in the US, it's not a big deal. At least as far as the numbers go. Yeah, there's one of these research companies whose data I've been following up recently. Those numbers don't mean much for Huawei in the US, but the problem is you can never underscore the US influence around the world. Like Kenya, for example, is a big ally of the US, so they get to share their military intelligence because of our strategic position in East Africa. So there's the war in Somalia, there's the war on terrorism, and all those things. The US can just tell our military and our top brass they'll stop sharing that because they're using Huawei communications equipment. So the next time our military is budgeting and procuring equipment, they'll buy non-Huawei so that they can maintain That's the same level of interaction with their peers in the US. So that's the kind of influence the US has. So much as this ban may not mean much for Huawei's business in the US directly, because it was never there in the first place, around the world there are those politics, geopolitics, that really matter, because the US has influence every corner of the world. That's why you've seen Japanese companies saying, we are not US companies, but we use American technology, so we are complying with whatever sanctions the US government has imposed. So there's that.
Well, someone was telling me actually, like, China doesn't really make noise about, like, the way you said about the US, like, controlling everything. That's why they're getting this coverage on Huawei, all coming from the US. And that's about to influence people's way of thinking about what is really happening. In China doesn't really make noise about, what they do. Like, for example, if China said, like, okay, let's now make noise about this.
As in, because for me, the way I'm looking at it is, when you look at Huawei, the two business segments they have the devices one, and they have the network business. For the devices, US is not a big market for them, but China is a big market for them. And in China, they don't have the Google Play services on their devices in China. So for them, it's not that big of a deal. But the issue is, when it comes to the network issue, the US is pushing for countries not to use Huawei technology, because I think even some US head of something, I think Secretary of State or something, is in Europe trying to push European countries not to use Huawei, because most of the European companies said they're going to use Huawei because it's affordable compared to using something like Nokia or other companies. And a country like Dutch, this week, I think they said the cost of acquiring 5G using Huawei, just the cost, it's cheaper compared to going to another company and buying the cost of the equipment from another company. So for them, they're going to use Huawei because of that. And Germany, I think they're trying to push back, considering the US was trying to bullying them into stopping using Huawei and their 5G network.
So am I right to say this war is just all about 5G?
But you see, the reason, actually the main reason why the US is having it's having it easy in terms of convincing people that not to use Huawei is, I think in 2017 there's a law China passed which said that a company the government can request a company to give them information, and the company should comply with that law. I think it's called the Web something law. They passed it in China. So the US is using that to tell people, you see, this is an issue with Huawei. So if you use their devices, you are at fault for that. But when you look at countries like France, they've said they know that the Chinese can spy on them. But it's up to them to do their due diligence and to protect themselves before using Huawei products. Yeah.
But it looks like Huawei knew this might happen in future. Like I know they've been working on a few, independent products, like the app gallery I read about on Android Kenya. Right now they're working on their own OS still. I mean, do you think this is going to work for them? How would they convince people to actually move from using Google services to using these other services?
I will say, I think we look at the world from our own view. So we think the whole world relies on Google services. We think the whole world relies on updates and all that. But when you think of it, Huawei high-end phones compared to Huawei low-end phones, which volume do they sell most? I believe it's the low-end phones. So, and the low-end phones never receive updates. They never send out they rarely do send out updates. Most of the people they target don't care really so much about these updates, and they could easily be moved to another way of experiencing their phones. So Huawei could use whatever they have, maybe the app gallery, maybe send out a new update to all their phones to have Google services removed and all that, and still survive because they sell mostly low-end phones, and people using low-end phones can easily start relying on other services. And Google services is not something that Huawei uses in China, their biggest market. So it's not like they're going to suffer from lacking that.
So the same could actually be implemented in
the
other markets.
The problem could be launching a new OS for other markets and trying to convince us on that. But I've also written about something called EOS that's trying to push a version of Android that doesn't rely on Google services, because we're trying to get away from the spying that America is accusing Huawei of being able to do that, but when you use your phone, Facebook spies on you, Google spies on you, and all that, and people are trying to be more private. So this could be a war on different fronts. It could be an economic war between America and China, then it could be the privacy war once and for all. So you find Android gets to become a more private operating system that nobody gets to control, because currently Google controls Play services and all that that run the security of your device and updates of your device, a lot of things. So if you could get to a privacy-focused operating system that runs Android apps, maybe Huawei will win that war, maybe other people will win that war, because Android at its base is open source, and Huawei is one of the contributors to the open source project.
Like I know right now the Huawei actually it has filed a lawsuit against the US government, and it makes me think, like, was this ban really necessary actually in the first place? Was it necessary?
No, we've just talked about the politics of the trade war. So it's necessary. If I'm trying to negotiate a deal with you, I'd use whatever weapon I have in my arsenal to try to get you to talk. So the ban, from my point of view as a consumer of Huawei services, the ban was unnecessary, of course. But from the point of view of the people who implemented it, it was necessary. You see, for a longest time, people have been saying 5G is coming, 5G is coming. And that coming, we didn't think it was that soon. Because as early as this year, we were having arguments with people on Twitter, me telling them I'm privy to some 5G tests somewhere, and they're like, the world has not even defined what 5G is. And then MWC came, and we saw how fast 5G was coming. So if there was to be any action taken to stop the Chinese and their 5G invasion, it had to be taken now. So maybe the horse might have bolted, but maybe they're right on the money. So with regards to time, yes, because what they're trying to do is, when you have, like in the case of Africa, a lot of the infrastructure by telecommunications companies has been laid down by Huawei. Now, the beauty of 5G is 5G requires a whole set of new infrastructure, nothing that was there before. But having used Huawei's equipment before, a lot of these telecommunications companies, mostly in Africa, you go to Latin America, most of Asia, they are at a level where they can easily go to the negotiating table with Huawei and get better terms for 5G equipment. And also you need to know that Huawei is relatively cheaper than Ericsson or Nokia. So Huawei's dominance in the world was a real threat, and it's a real threat. If you're a superpower, you'll feel threatened. And then there's also the not yet confirmed links between Huawei and the Chinese state, which, when you ask me, that is also politics. American companies, Boeing, trades with the US government, like does classified stuff and everything. Cadillac does the same thing. Google does the same thing. In fact, if you were to go as per the last American election, these American tech companies, Apple, Google, they all donated huge sums of money to their respect to presidential candidates in the election. So if we are going to accuse the Chinese of doing some things, make sure just your plate is also clean. It is not. The assumption here is this side has always been evil, and this side has always been a force for good and a proponent for the free world, which at this point in time is not here or there. So what we are looking at is a war of other people and probably being imposed on us. And now that goes back down to the 10K phone you're going to buy on the street. Will it get dictated by other people's wars? Does that affect how you use it? Because look at it this way. China's largest market, Huawei's largest market is China. Its second largest market is Russia. When you look at the European market, the Middle East market, and the African market, combine those three regions, you still don't you still don't get the same number of users that Huawei has in China. That's number one. And then number two, combined the entire global market, is when you actually get equal to the number of devices that Huawei sells in China. So if we are how we are approaching this is Huawei has been staring at a point of global dominance, and they are the only company in the world that creates the infrastructure, lays it all out, and also creates devices to come around there. Ericsson when it was bought out by Sony from that partnership they had such a similar arrangement, they exited that market. You remember when at the advent of the mobile phone in Kenya, Ericsson, there used to be Ericsson phones.
Yeah.
Then they banded with Sony and made Sony Ericsson very successful. And then Sony bought them out and they were out. And Siemens used to do phones. And the old Nokia used to do phones too. All those have since exited. Only Huawei does those things today. So that kind of end-to-end gives them huge leverage that anyone willing to want them to, especially if it's not a company from your country. It becomes a nightmare. Yeah, so there's that. The impact is, and this is what I've been trying to argue with a lot of people on Twitter and they don't get, is much as I'm a big proponent of Android and I write about Android almost for a living, availability of Android or absence of it on Huawei devices, based on those numbers I've shared, will have very little impact. Number one, it will slow down the expansion in Europe almost to zero.
Yeah.
But looking at those numbers, that's almost nothing.
I mean, they're not the major markets, right?
Yes. Huawei was growing in Italy, in Spain, and they were looking to expand in Europe, and their premium devices were getting there. But it's not that much. The next big source of goal for anyone is actually the African market. If you look at smartphone numbers, they've been dropping the last, 3 years? Yeah, but ours keep going up. So they have a hold of this market, and where they don't have a hold, it's other Chinese companies that do. Anyone who's Chinese have been away for so long. Actually, Samsung has maintained some consistency, but they're the only ones. So, and then there's Latin America, which has been experiencing some dips, but which has high potential. So things can only go up. And then look at the devices they sell there. Last year, Huawei's bestseller across the world was phones in the Nova series. They're budget phones, sold mostly in Asia. And in Kenya, here and most African countries, we have their Y series equivalents. Which is really doing well. So and then also last year, the phone business and the devices business, the consumer business group of Huawei became their most profitable, beating the network business for the first time. But those volumes weren't driven by the West. The West just provided an avenue for growth. But I don't think it was ever going to be their future. And then look at this other place where they've been doing well. The phones they provide here never get updates at all. I've had the Y9 2019 given to me by Huawei since last year. It's never getting Android P, leave alone Q. But it remains an excellent phone. And the people buying it don't care.
Actually, most consumers don't care about
because what it's what I was saying about the media. The discussion we've been having is mostly Western based and geek based, and that accounts for very little percentage when it comes to the people who use these devices. All of us here have interacted with the Y series Huawei's. The operating system it comes with is the one that stays with it for good. It will receive monthly security updates here and there, but those are insignificant. There's never any real upgrade. And that's the reality for a lot of Huawei phone users. And that's been what their business runs on. So you can't come tomorrow and claim they'll die because those things won't happen. They haven't been happening already. And that hasn't been their strength.
Because I'm sure most consumers will be okay with the new OS Huawei is working on actually. They don't really care about
I can't say that now, but the point is we can't discount or dismiss Huawei based on the strengths that they've never played to. Like their biggest market is China, where Google Play services have never mattered. Here they'll just need to figure out our needs, and then the app gallery. And from what I've read and what we've shared on our platform is that whatever they're working on will be compatible with lots of the apps. So they have the muscle to actually pull off everything that everyone is saying they can't do. What we are doing is we are judging them based on our little understanding of their actual market. Because I'm sure they're smart enough not to let the kind of lead they've had be blown away by sanctions in the US.
Oh, interesting. You want to add something, Dickson? Or Kaluka? But I mean, based on what we've read and what we've covered on different blogs, I know in some way this ban has affected Huawei in a very, very big way. I mean, how can it redeem itself right now as we wind up? We have like how many minutes? as we wind up? How can it redeem itself right now?
I-
Because I know the markets, I've seen there's an article one of our writers did about how some people are disposing their Huawei phones because they're not sure about what will happen next. You've had people actually asking
disposing
you.
their Huawei phones are just stupid people who don't know anything.
They're also rich.
And they're also rich.
Yeah, people are
Your
disposing
phone is
P30,
working.
P30 Pros.
This is just sensational news reported by the media, I think, because I don't think anybody will buy a P30 and dispose
Yeah,
it when it's still working, unless they're stupid.
Yeah.
I will think Samsung or other companies are sponsoring such news so that they get sales for
Yeah.
their devices. But I believe, no, it's the truth. But I believe Huawei will not have a big problem going forward. After this 90-day whatever,
Yeah.
I believe Google also stands to lose a lot from having the second biggest seller of smartphone not use your platform anymore. So other Western companies will also think of this in a different way. And we need to come to a situation where we understand we've let America really control the conversation around tech in the world. And it's high time America realizes they're not controlling the world anymore like they used to. It's not them who run the world. The developers are not mostly Americans right now. The open source providers aren't Americans now. So you can't say Huawei will be dying because of an American-owned IP. No. Android is open source. We do not need Google services to survive on Android. They made it open source themselves. If they don't want people to use an open source project, they shouldn't have them contribute to the project. If they want to keep Google services, I think Google can keep the license and Android will still work, because Android has gotten to a level where we don't need to rely on that. The open source code is an operating system on its own. It will run very well. So Huawei can manage to survive on just making either an OS that runs Android, because they can't do an OS that doesn't run Android right now, because Android controls 99% of devices on Earth. So you make an OS, you get some security services, and you use developers to create something that works for the rest of the world. If America wants to license companies based on agreements with the American government, then let them do that. But what they should understand is Africa runs on Chinese devices. So all Chinese devices stand to be banned from having the license based on the precedent set by the ban on Huawei. So we're looking at a future where Android won't rely on Google services, or either Google services will be made open to and mandatory to all. So
Is that something you agree with, Kaluka?
Very much so. Because for me, I'm looking at it, because the US has had so much success in their technology for so many years, but things are shifting and people are not so much relying on the US you're not relying on the US for everything right now. And that's especially what has shown with this ban with Huawei. The Chinese companies are coming up, and they're coming up with products that people want to buy. Because for me, I'm not going to dispose of my phone because Trump is saying something that as long as the phone is working, I'm going to use it. And 2 days ago, I was having a conversation with some people, and I was asking them, if you get a phone that doesn't have all the Google apps and the Google services, but it works, will you continue using it? Because for me, I'm looking at Gmail, I can replace that. All these other apps, I can replace them. So as long as the phone is working and is working the way I want it to work, the US and China can continue fighting. For me, I don't really care about that. So as long as the phone that I bought is working the way I expect it to, for me, I'm okay. Yeah.
Interesting. Anybody else want to add anything?
I was looking to a future where we can have an international body control software, so that we don't get into a situation in 2030 or 2050 where two countries have trade issues. So you find that software that's running something in Africa is banned, and you have to because software is used in so many things. With 5G coming, software will run hospitals and all that. We shouldn't get to a level where software is licensed based on geopolitics.
And trust me, this is gonna. I think now, from what happened, it's an eye opener. Now I think companies like Huawei or any other company will start looking at making options available for consumers and everything.
Actually, I'm here, to be honest, I'm rooting for Huawei to break away from Google and the dependence on Google and show the world that
they
it
can
be
do this.
Because much as I'm a big proponent of Android and a big fan of Google, what we have is things are not always ideal. It's always been this way. America's always control a lot of what goes on. But it's the first time that they're having the kind of leader that they have. and who's out to show everyone the kind of muscle
Yeah.
that Uncle Sam has.
Trump.
And as a result, is just rubbing everyone the wrong way. Because this has always been there. It's just that it's never been applied
Yeah.
the way that it's been. So every other company, like all these companies that in the Open Handset Alliance that contributes to what we make of as Android, all of them, Samsung, everyone name them. I'm sure they've had these discussions internally. And going forward, everyone will be reducing their reliance on American tech and American suppliers. Because you wouldn't want to wake up, you're the number 2 smartphone maker in the world, and you wake up and someone decides to cripple your business. You know, like the way our ATMs in this country run on Windows. Imagine if you woke up on the wrong side of the US and they told Microsoft to pull any support to Kenya. One, ATMs are supposed to be secure, so updates are critical. So we'd stop having money in Kenya simply because somebody somewhere said
In the US.
yeah. So this is a wake up call to everyone. Yeah. Because software is that critical. Visualize a situation where all our banks need to replace their Windows licenses because they've been revoked. There's the ATM, there's the way the banks run themselves. It's unimaginable. And I think that's why everyone is saying Huawei is dying. Because when you start to think of it that way, some things are unimaginable. But I think there's no company that is better placed to fight this ban than Huawei.
Yes, exactly.
Some things will be hard, like this UK company which is owned by the Japanese, the ARM. Yeah, like ARM has an entire monopoly on the global chip design business. So if they pull the rug from under you, you are basically done. But it's not past the Chinese to come up with something. They love to fight the accusations of IP theft, which they're already dealing with, like in the US, and all those things, and they'll need to figure things out. But there's no one who's better placed to do it. Than them. Because for a few things, their network business will be fine. So they can keep generating revenues. Unless the US really goes a step higher and interferes outside Africa, because the EU has said they're working with the Chinese. So Africa seems sealed. But unless the US goes out of its way outside Africa to really make sure Huawei does not have penetration, they'll keep generating income from their network business.
Wow.
And they'll take a hit when it comes to phones. That's for sure. That's in the short term. Long term, I think they'll still be around. We can still, when this podcast grows, we can still have another podcast and we'll still have Huawei phones on the table.
Happy P40. But yes, we'll have to wait until the 90-day ends and see actually what happens after that. But yes, thanks so much, guys,
I think nothing will happen.
Thanks so much, guys. We are at Portable Voices Podcast Studios on Muranga Road at Wakika House. Yes, and yes, my name is Nick. I blog at TechTrends, ke.co.ke.
My name is Kaluka, Tech Arena.
Dickson, techish.com.
Chenze, androidkenya.com.
Yes. Bye. Until next time.